The Sleeping Gypsy by Henri Rousseau. Imagine a vast moonlit desert. The air is perfectly still. A lion stands over a sleeping woman, motionless, transfixed, and somehow, impossibly, there is no threat, only silence and wonder, and a strange, aching peace. This is The Sleeping Gypsy, painted in 1897 by Henri Rousseau. One of the most haunting and mysterious images in the entire history of Western art. Today we're going to look closely at what's actually in this painting, and more importantly, at what it means, and why it still holds us spellbound more than a century later. Before we step into the painting, let's talk about the man who created it, because Rousseau himself is as unlikely and fascinating as his art. Henri Julien Félix Rousseau was born in Laval, France in 1844. He worked for most of his adult life as a customs officer, a toll collector on the outskirts of Paris. He earned himself the nickname Le Douanier, meaning the customs man. He had no formal art training whatsoever. He taught himself to paint in his spare time, beginning seriously only in his 40s. When he first exhibited his work in Paris, the critics laughed. His proportions were off, his perspective was strange, his figures looked stiff and dreamlike. But here is the extraordinary thing. What the critics dismissed as incompetence was actually something far more rare. Rousseau painted with an uncorrupted eye, unfiltered by academic convention, unburdened by the rules that trained painters followed automatically. His vision was entirely his own. Over time, the avant-garde began to see what the establishment had missed. Pablo Picasso admired him deeply. The poet Guillaume Apollinaire called him a genius. By the time Rousseau died in 1910, poor, still largely unrecognized by the mainstream, he had created a body of work that would eventually hang in the greatest museums in the world. The Sleeping Gypsy now belongs to the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Let's look at the painting itself. The canvas is large, over 2 meters wide, and horizontal, almost cinematic in its proportions. The scene it shows us is immediately gripping. In the foreground, a woman lies asleep on the bare desert sand. She is dressed in a long, boldly striped robe of brilliant color, reds, yellows, greens, blues, incongruously festive against the bare earth. Beside her lie the tools of a wandering life, a mandolin or lute resting against her body and a terracotta jug at her feet. Her face is serene, completely at rest, turned gently to one side. Standing over her, enormous, close enough to touch, is a lion. His mane is pale, almost silver in the moonlight. His eyes are open, alert, unblinking. He looks down at the sleeping woman with an expression that is impossible to read. Is it curiosity? Hunger? Something like tenderness? Rousseau gives us no answer. Behind them both, the desert stretches away to a distant line of mountains, dark and low on the horizon. Beyond that, a flat expanse of water. A river, a sea, we cannot tell. And above it all, a full moon, luminous and round, hangs in a sky scattered with a handful of stars. The light in this painting is unlike anything in nature. It is soft and total and sourceless. Everything is equally illuminated, as if the moonlight itself has no particular origin, no direction. It is the light of a dream. This brings us to the painting's deepest mystery. What is actually happening here? Rousseau himself offered a description in a letter to the mayor of Laval when he hoped to sell the painting. He wrote that a wandering woman, a musician, has fallen asleep in the desert, exhausted from her journey. A lion happens upon her and sniffs at her, but does not harm her. The lion, he suggests, is enchanted by her. But the painting resists any single reading. Art historians and critics have found in it echoes of ancient myths. Orpheus charming the beasts, Daniel in the lion's den, the peaceable kingdom foretold by Isaiah. Others have read it as a meditation on the unconscious mind, on the vulnerability of sleep, on the thin line between safety and danger that we cross every night when we close our eyes. There is something in the composition that refuses to let fear in. The woman's body is utterly relaxed. She has no idea the lion is there. And the lion, despite its power, is still. Perhaps that is the painting's quiet argument, that in the deepest sleep, we are protected by our very unawareness, that the unconscious has a safety of its own. The surrealists, who loved Rousseau enormously, saw in this painting a prefigurement of their own obsessions, the dream world, the irrational, the dissonant collision of things that should not coexist. A lion in a moonlit desert, standing peacefully over a sleeping woman with a mandolin. The logic is the logic of dreams, not waking life. Rousseau's technique is worth a moment of attention because it is so strange and so deliberate. He painted with meticulous detail the individual strands of the lion's mane, the careful stripes of the woman's robe, the precise strings of the mandolin. Yet the overall effect is not realism. It is something else entirely. His figures have a flatness to them, a two-dimensional quality reminiscent of medieval tapestry or ancient Egyptian painting. Depth and perspective work differently here. The landscape behind the figures is like a painted backdrop, serene and still. Nothing casts a shadow in the way it would in a naturalistic painting. This is what we now call naïve art or primitive art, terms that can be misleading. There is nothing naive about the effect Rousseau achieves. His simplifications are exactly right. They create a world slightly removed from the one we know, a world where a lion and a sleeping woman can exist together under the same moon without catastrophe, without explanation. The Sleeping Gypsy is, at its heart, a painting about the mystery at the center of existence. Rousseau, the self-taught customs officer from provincial France, who painted jungles he had never visited and deserts he had only imagined, created something that reaches a place in us that more sophisticated artists often miss. It reaches the place where we are still animal, still vulnerable, still capable of being watched over by something wild and enormous that chooses, in the end, not to disturb us. That feeling, inexplicable, unforgettable, is the gift of great art. And in this painting, Rousseau gave it to us completely. If you found this analysis interesting, consider subscribing. There are many more paintings like this one waiting to be explored. And leave a comment below. What do you see when you look at this image? The lion's presence has meant something different to everyone who has ever stood before it. Until next time.